What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA Crunch Time before lock. We've got a crazy card. 14 fights. We're back up towards the bigger cards for the UFC, but not the best competition out there, Squirrel, this week. But I think it's a fun slate. This is a very, very closely lined fight up to bottom. There's one fight that's really out of control, but even that one seems a little bit wide. What do you think of this? It's actually a mixed bag of fun, I'd say.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's a little bit of a, like I said, on the Blender show yesterday, it's a little bit of a quantity over quality card, but that makes it fun. And it's, everybody's going to score the same, right? Even if it's, these fights are still going to be 5 points for a takedown or whatever. Doesn't really matter whether it's, Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa or,
I was going to say,
Makhachev or whatever.
What did we call last week? We said Costa, Strickland, stackable perhaps. The smaller the field, the more optimal it probably becomes. Good call on that. We both kind of saw that happening. And how did you end up doing last week? I know it didn't go to the W, but sounded like a great contest. I don't know if you ended up going or not.
I was really sick last weekend, and it just didn't make sense to go up. And I was gonna have to come back early Sunday anyway. And I was so sick that I'm not gonna be able to wake up early Sunday because the card's going to go late. But I won the large field. I tied 4-way tie for 60,000 something, and finished 11th
what did that one look like? I mean, it had to have looked like what we talked about.
Yeah, it did. It did have, so the winning lineup in the large field GPP last weekend for DraftKings did have a stack of Strickland and Costa. I forget who else.
I know. Move on too fast.
I know it had Makhachev, so it had Islam in there, Costa, Strickland. I don't remember who else, who the other three were.
Well, we talked about 2 5-round fights. We're back to 1 5-round fight that I think will be obvious to be your starting point, where all of the ownership will be with Cannonier and Imavov. I think this is a slippery one, and I tell you that because you can see this one being that Strickland Costa type where they just go tit for tat. They have 220 plus strikes each, and you're like, what the hell? You actually might need both. But with 14 fights, I would hope the ownership would be a little bit more spread out and lighter on these guys, but the ownership's still centrally located towards this main event.
Yeah, I think it's a good but not great main event, and I think it's a good one. It is. It's similar to the Strickland Coastal one. It's probably going to go 5 rounds. Probably going to be a somewhat high volume striking. But I think the 14 fights versus 12 fights makes a big difference because we're just more likely to have a couple more underdogs that win, and the lines on this card being a little bit closer than last week makes a big difference too. Because we're just probably going to have a handful of underdogs that win. It's I think anyone's in play on this card. I think you can make an argument for any fighter on this card.
100%. Sometimes
not a great argument, but the argument is still there. And so we're just probably going to have a couple underdogs that win, and that means those underdogs that win are going to outscore the loser of the main event most likely. But it's a pretty good main event. Certainly one, and we did the expert survey. It's definitely one you would want to stack in cash. Stacking it in tournaments, maybe smaller field tournaments, not crazy. But yeah, I would. It's more a card I would go try to find that those couple lower priced underdogs are going to win.
Yeah, I like the take, play whoever you want on this one because, you have a very, very, very slight value in Daniel Marcos. That's going to be my starting point. So we never talk cash, but I'm sure people are going to want to take the very slight favorite. This is just one of those situations where I don't even want to look at this fight on 14 fight slate. Marcos, absolutely a cash type play because of the value, right? But it's ever so slight. My problem is on that particular fight, I feel like I was hoping the ownership would go towards him, right? People automatically click the value, and that's a trappy fight because Castaneda probably has more tools to win the fight, could stall him out against the cage with a takedown. I don't really like that fight, period, but I understand both of us tagging these guys, right? Like I had to bring it up first because I'm looking at it going, we both tagged opposite guys. Castaneda would have to what does he have to do? He could make a 3-round decision and still get to 85 to 95 points. I think that's very interesting because of pricing. And Marcos on the other side, I mean, you'd be killing off what, a 30%? Because the smaller the field, the more he's going to be owned.
Yeah, I agree. So yeah, I noticed we tagged opposite sides of this one. And I think the Daniel Marcos thing does make sense if you're looking for the win equity. But I think Castaneda probably outscores him in a win, and it's tightly lined. Like, so yeah, I put in my red up there. It's a still coin flippish, 55%, 45% fight. It's just that the 55% is on the side of the cheaper Daniel Marcos. But like in terms of scoring, like Castaneda's not like necessarily going to get like a he's not like first rounder bust or anything like that. But I don't think he'd put up a particularly low score in a win. And so that makes me kind of side with Castaneda, right? Like at less than half the ownership of Marcos, I think Castaneda scores better in a win. So like if I'm getting a little bit of leverage there, I think I'm going to go like the Castaneda side.
Yeah, why not? And let's be honest, Daniel Marcos fights have not been pretty in the UFC. He's got a quote unquote clean record, 15-0. I would not know. The Davy Grant one, he got very, very lucky. So that's one of those situations where, yeah, of course, he's going to have a little bit of value. GPP, I understand taking Castaneda and its ownership, right? Like he's going to be one of the lower owned guys, Castaneda, on the slate. Where's your next starting point after you kind of look towards any value? Is it looking for more value, like very slight? Because the pricing's pretty damn tight. So like what's your next starting point?
So like a lot of people, right? I tend to think in terms of the favorites. And two of the favorites that I really like is Raul Rosas, and I think we both had him in the expert survey as potentially being the highest scoring fighter on the card. I like the idea, and we've seen it. I mean, he's only 3 fights into his UFC career, but like one was a knockout, and then the other was a multiple takedowns, right? Win. The other was a loss. But but I like the idea. I can get there multiple ways, right? Like multiple paths to victory. It's like the baseball hitter. You hit a couple home runs or steal a few bases for you. I like that kind of fighter. And he's got I think about 20% chance of a first round win. Like that puts him probably on the winning lineup. Or he could be multiple takedowns, kind of spamming takedowns, right? That's the kind of thing that can put up a massive score, right? Like a first round win, maybe he gets 95, maybe he gets 101. If he's getting these like double digit takedown wins, then that's a massive untouchable score. So he's one of my favorites on the card. And then Eduarda Mora, the other favorite that I've got tagged there at only 8,800. She's another fighter. Get multiple takedowns. I think the line on her is 2.5 or 3.5 takedowns. I love that DraftKings is and something I just noticed in the past week. And that might just be for my state, but that we're doing like pretty like robust fight props, which I think is awesome. And they've got I think they've got, trying to look on the takedowns number. It's either 2.5 or 3.5 for Mora. Yeah, it's over 2.5 just to the over. So like that's at 8,800. That's pretty good. She's got pretty good win odds. And then there's actually another favorite, Ryan Dos Santos. Line's been moving in her direction. She's already a lopsided favorite. She's another fighter that I don't like her as much maybe as Mora and Rosas, but don't think she's going to see as much ownership either. And she's like her win odds are starting to like creep up to a point that looks really nice on a even on a GPP lineup. So
let's be honest. Sometimes we see people come into the UFC that just aren't UFC caliber, and what do? They're there to be had for a lot of fantasy points, control time, sneaky pitter patter, and India has not been a hotbed for MMA. Let's be honest; she's a little undersized, and both these ladies actually are pretty small. So I think there's just going to be constant action too. So you'd be buying into that higher level of volume potentially, but I mean, finish equity is kind of questionable on this one because it's like people don't know. People don't think there's going to be a finish, but you and I think there's probably could be because of the step up in competition for Tomar.
Yeah, and Blender said it on his show yesterday. He was actually talking about Brad Katona, but I think it holds true for Ryan Dos Santos as well. That sometimes when you see a lopsided line, it's just a mauling. And so and it may not matter how many rounds it goes, whether it's an early finish, late finish. Like if it's a totally just mismatched fight, you sometimes get those just mauling points. I don't even know what they are, right? But yeah,
Mauling points.
Yeah,
we need to trademark that.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's like mauling points, right? Like fighters on, it could be that they're just on top, and like it's not necessarily pitter patter, right? Like, it could be significant strikes as well. And they're getting the control time, and they got the either knockdown or takedown to get there, right? And you see these things.
Last week we had one where there was Scramble Fest. Oh, it was the ugly women's MMA. Dude, I kind of thought it was going to get ugly, but when we talk about ugly fights, reverses are 6 points each. People don't remember that they were going 6 points, 6 points, 6 points. At one point, I thought they were going to break the slate as a stack. That's how crazy that was.
Was it 6 or it's 6 or 5? But I agree, it's like as much as a takedown.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, and like I saw, they were just rolling over each other. Like, and I didn't have either of them in my live final lineup, and I was like, oh, I'm done. And Edwards, but like it's important. Like Edwards outscored Lima in a loss, right? So like that's what I knew I was done, because I had Lima at 58 points in his win or something, or 52 in his win. Edwards went out and just kept rolling around with Eileen Perez, put up 60 something in her loss. And so I'm sitting there looking at my purple 58s or whatever, for Andre Lima. Like, doesn't matter that he's purple, right? Because like I'd much rather have Jocelyn Edwards in her 65 gray loss. Those grappling points are important, but for that, like, you probably want a more closely lined fight that's going to have some grappling.
Exactly. Let me circle back to the Moira and Gomes. That's going to be a key fight, because Moira is just going to prototypically be that grapple heavy. But if she gets caught in a guillotine, if she gets countered and outstruck on the feet and gets hurt right away, she's not going to be able to get those takedowns. That's one of the best fights on the whole entire slate. And unfortunately, people are going towards it, man. People are getting savvy out there, Squirrel. What are we doing? And it's like, listen, I don't think this is going to be true. Moira has more ownership at 33% compared to Raul Rosas Jr. at 27%. You should have led with, we're getting a discount of ownership at the moment on Rosas Jr. But I look at those two types of plays as the same thing. It's like, I have more faith in Denise Gomes knocking out Moira than I would ever have Torcios being leverage on Rosas. Would you agree with that?
I agree. Torcios makes me a little bit nervous. If he had better win odds, I would have put him as like that fighter that is most likely to like upset my night. I've just listening around, as much stuff as I can during the week. I have yet to listen to the person that's like, that's long on Ricky Tercios in this fight. Yeah. It's surprising he's maybe not more of an underdog. I just think, Rosas is one of these like young stars that I think the UFC wants to promote. He's got the one loss now, but came back from it pretty well in his next fight. I think Rosas is one of those fighters, right? He could be getting like multiple takedowns. I think it's price that's causing him to have lower ownership than Moira. But I feel more confident in Rosas. It's just you got to pay up to get there.
Yeah. I just, we have two ladies of the Gomes that had legitimately has knockout power in the women's division, which you don't see. And then you have that powerhouse grappling. Something's got to give. And I think there's a lot of fantasy in that one. And obviously we love our Rosas. Let's move on to maybe the two inside the distance guys, right? Like this slate is crazy when it comes to inside the distance. You have a lot of plus 125 range, plus 150s, but there's only two fighters really that are minus. We have Bruno Ferreira as the biggest likelihood. What is it? Minus 220-ish inside the distance, 9,400. Unfortunately, it's easy to get him into your lineups. Like, I almost wish the smaller slate where people would just be jamming him, you could kind of take a bigger stance. Now with the bigger slate, I think, people are still going to be gravitating towards him. And then Miguel Baeza, minus 110, I think last time I looked inside the distance. I look at these two fights as really important because of those strong finishing props. But why in the world? We went through on the Ground and Pound podcast that you could still listen to before lock. Baeza is chinny. All I can think of is him looking good and then not getting knocked out. Like, why? Like, he was such a big favorite here. I was a little surprised. And we know Punahele Soriano can crack. So I like leverage there against him. But I just have less faith in Stoltzfus. Like Stoltzfus has even done it before, right? Like he's literally the type of guy that can take over after Bruno gasses out because he's only gone a round and a half before. He's really never shown it past that. They're both leverage plays against these bigger inside the distance guys, but I just don't have a lot of faith behind them.
Yeah, I think of the fighters mentioned, I think Stoltzfus might be my favorite, and that's
Yeah,
because
he has
he's
to
like
be, right? Path of victory. He would grind him out.
Yeah, exactly. And he'll get 6,800. So this isn't a card with the underdogs where I actually feel all this confidence saying about everybody that, well, at this price, no matter what he does, he's going to land on the winning lineup. Because I think we could see a couple of underdogs that are winning. They're then competing with each other. So you actually have to put up a little bit of an upside score as well. But I think, yeah, Stoltzfus, I think, can get there at 6,800. Bruno Ferreira is like probably the fighter that I'm most most scared of. Maybe Katona, right? Because he's just got such strong odds to win. I think we've got Rosas owned less than Ferreira, and I would flip that. And I probably intend to flip that in my multi-entry set. I'm Ferreira's, and I think the same thing is true of Baeza as well. Like they do have like pretty good inside the distance lines, pretty good like first round win odds. I'm worried that if they don't get that first round win, what does their score look like?
That's the problem.
Yeah, if it's an early second win, and it goes like we see this all the time, where like a fighter is dominating the fight, right, and the guy just survives the first round, and then just goes down early in the second round, right, and then instead of a 105, 110 point score for getting that first round win, you're getting like a 75, 78 point win, because that's the drop off, right? It goes from like 90 to 70 or whatever. So yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of prioritizing the takedowns and the grappling a little bit more than the strikers who can get an early finish, because it's like not like there's anybody on this card that's got like the 2/3 chance of getting a first round win. And even when we've seen that, right, like Robellis or whatever, like that doesn't always happen. So I mean, I'll have some Bruno Ferreira just because he's a strong favorite. He's the guy with the best chances of getting a win inside the distance in the first round. I think you have to like roster him if you're doing multiple entries. I don't know if I see myself getting to 36%. And if I'm rostering one of these like high 9,000 priced guys, like I'd much rather roster Rosas at 36% than Ferreira.
What do you think about this slate just being an MME slate, and you kind of scattershot this range of underdogs, right? Like I feel like getting leverage against some of these plays that we just talked about is going to be important, but like where's the next spot you'd be looking at? Is it going to be, and I can't believe I'm saying this name in 2024, is it Dominic Reyes? Like he has no chin. But if he can revert back to where he was, John, I mean, where he was killing people and getting 100+ points, he also has a path of getting bailed out by 3 rounds of striking, heavy volume striking. So I feel like that's also in the back pocket. But I mean, obviously Stamen's right there too, who's going to have more ownership because he could go for takedowns, right? It's a tricky slate. It really, really is a tricky slate when you look at it, because Cody Stamen like has the ability to go for takedowns and doesn't do it. And he's a smaller guy, so you just have like a really low floor because he can't get to the fighter to try to strike in volume.
Yeah, it is. It's a multi-entry slate. It's like it's a slate that I want to like spray a lot of bullets. I don't, because there's nothing that we're really getting that's solid on this card. Like there's nothing that's like, oh, here's a mispriced fighter, right? Like here's something that huge leverage point, whatever, right? There's not a lot here. There's not a lot that for the price like distinguishes itself from anything else. Like Daniel Marcos is the win equity guy on this card, and we think he's just not necessarily going to be that high scoring. So I do think it's a multi-entry slate for Reyes. Like I'd rather have Reyes than Dustin Jacoby, but that's another fight.
But that's even more crazy. Because the dude can't take a punch. Yeah. Dominic Reyes can't eat punches, and that's why it's a wild slate. That's where I was going. It's like on a normal thing, you'd think Jacoby minus 125 inside the distance, and it's not. It's going the opposite way.
Yeah. I'm a little bit wary of guys that have started the announcing path too. Like the guys that are maybe trying to protect the face so they can go on TV and do the announcing, like Dominic Reyes. Now, Anthony Smith, it worked out. But like I think that like once these guys get into announcing, they're like, oh, we can get paid for this. Oh, this is much easier than fighting. So that's something that gives me a little bit of concern with Dominic Reyes. But I'd rather own Reyes than Dustin Jacoby. Cody Stamen is actually a fighter that's growing on me a little bit. It's at 7,300.
Don't trust him, John.
Yeah,
Don't trust him.
But that's kind of priced in, right? And like I think people are gonna just avoid this fight because like Taylor Lapilus is probably like the least favorite. Everybody's like least favorite, because he's just like there is a really good chance he gets outscored by some losing fighters. Cody Stamen, though, I don't know if that's necessarily true. He's just the underdog. And it's 7,300 again. Like he doesn't need to do as much to find his way onto a winning lineup as Lapilus does. So like I totally understand people like looking at Lapilus and being like, yeah, like 8-10%, that seems about right. I'd rather have Cody Stamen because I think he can he can get some takedowns, put up a decent winning score of 7,300 and find himself on the winning lineup.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, it makes sense. I was interested in seeing like Lapilus just isn't a killer. Like if he had any bit of killer instincts for single digit ownership up top there, it would have been interesting. But it's like it's not your what was the one where Stamen shot in for a takedown early? I think it was like one of the Habib Saeed Nurmagomedov or something, and he just caught him in a guillotine. I don't even think that's possible for Lapilus, right? Like it's like I'd be playing Jacoby over Lapilus every day, and even Mora. That's the difficult thing. You just got too much competition.
Yeah, I get worried about the fighters that consistently put up low scores in their wins because they have no incentive to change. And that like I'm talking about Taylor Lapilus, right? Like he puts up like 60-point wins. Well, if they're wins, he's sitting there going, "Oh, that was great." Like that's a winning fight. And maybe at some point down the road, when it comes to like trying to get on the pay-per-view or whatever, they care about like, oh, I got to make this exciting. But yeah, at this point, like with Lapilus, he's probably just thinking like, yeah, this is great. I can land 50 strikes, get the win, get out of there.
Move on to the Paris card. Everybody cheers for me, and I'm happy.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I understand like being low on Lapilus. I think Cody Stamen's maybe a little bit sneaky. Like he was somebody I was considering for the takedowns article.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Let's pivot towards. I have two more fights that I think are going to be sneaky upside fights, but I also have one that I don't think anybody's going to go to. Can you nail the one that I don't think anyone's going to go to? And I think that there's actually an endless ceiling in. I think you know which one I'm going to be talking about. It's very low owned as a combined fight.
Maybe Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa.
It's almost like we know what we're talking about, John. That is a sneaky high ceiling fight. That has grappling, that has ugly striking that would account for it. Pricing is okay. It's a great pivot. TJ's coming in because it makes a lot of sense. I mean,
they're already in. One of them's already in my lineup. I'm starting to know what I'm talking about.
25% owned as a combined fight, John. That's wild on this slate. I mean, friggin' everybody's been 20% owned, and then this whole fight's 25.
Yeah, so this one is the Andrea Lee Montana De La Rosa. It's probably the lowest level. Actually, it's got some competition for the lowest level of the of the female fights. But like I said, like their strikes count just the same. Their takedowns count just the same on DraftKings scoring. So even though it's maybe a little bit lower level female fight, especially like the pitter patter, right? Like the strikes count 0.2. Significant strikes are 0.2. So if it's a significant strike, you get both the 0.4. But even if it's just the pitter patter because somebody's on top, that's 0.2. They can sit there and pile up 40 non-significant strikes, right? There's no particular reason to think like the Andrea Lee Montana De La Rosa fight is going to be that low scoring. It's just neither of these fighters has like that great of a chance against anybody else in their division. So
7 straight losses, John. 7 between them.
Yeah. So I put this in, I think my hot take on the expert survey was I think all three female fighters, like the winning fighter from all three female fights, puts up more than 100 points. Yeah. So like I don't know why people are avoiding the female fights, but I think I think that's one that I'm interested in both Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa. And De La Rosa can do a lot less, right? Or at least a little bit less than that on the winning lineup.
Well, she doesn't do much anyways. No offense. I mean, that both of these ladies do wear damage as well. So you got that little out that maybe, you know, an eye swells up or something crazy. Like even Liam perhaps might have said on Ground and Pound that there's some finish equity. I mean, they do legitimately have 7 straight losses between them. This is a rematch. In the first fight, Andrea Lee only scored 70 points, but you know, maybe the fire wasn't there. You know, maybe they were content with being in the UFC. These two ladies definitely have to go for it. I would think like if Montana De La Rosa forces the grappling, you could actually look at like more of a Perez type of spot with reverses. There's sneaky scoring ability in this spot. And to be fair, Montana De La Rosa scored over 100 points multiple times.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like they're rolling around. That's 5 points every time they turn over. It's 5 more points. We just saw that with the Eileen Perez and Jocelyn Edwards. I mean, I was sitting there going, oh, that can't be a reversal. Oh, there. Yeah. Oh, there we go again. Like it isn't like suddenly that's like 15 points, right? For the combined fight. Yeah, so I agree. I think that's sneaky upside. No reason to be like under the field on that one. I'd much rather be over the field on like Andrea Lee and Montana De La Rosa than some of the fighters are maybe striking only and have a chance, better chance of an early finish, but like also don't have a majority chance at a over 50% chance at an early finish.
I'm laughing because I can remember those knuckleheads that accidentally, or maybe they purposefully stack to see their score way up above everybody before the slate's over, right? You know, the first few fights. I'm looking at the stack and I'm like, oh no, Perez and whatever Edwards are gonna be way up top. And I'm like, they're holding for another fight. Oops, they're holding for. I'm like, no, don't do this. I'm like, Paulo Costa's still coming. We're okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we at least had had a fight that stacked to the one. It just wasn't the Perez and Edwards.
Yeah, no, for sure. I love a finish equity fight on this slate. Lower owned again. People somewhat gravitating towards the underdog. I would say Charles Radke, Carlos Prates. The problem is it's a kickboxing fight. I couldn't tag it. I couldn't even put a little blurb next to it because I felt like if this thing gets out of that first round, it probably doesn't score well just because these two have shown that they'll just pitter patter on the feet and there's really not a lot else. But I really do think that there's some severe finish equity because Radke, I mean, he says some awful things on the microphone. Prates had a horrible first round and then turned it around in the second round. I could see this thing definitely scoring very poorly, and I absolutely see equity in the first round.
Yeah. So Prates is one of my least favorite fighters, probably on the card. I think he's got some first round finish equity. I think about 27% implied odds, but he has less odds to win his fight than Dos Santos, who's priced below him. Justin Jacoby, who's priced below him. Lapalus, who's probably not going to put up a high score, but is also priced below him. So you're losing a little bit of win equity on Prates, but then you're getting it on Radke. Right down the flip side of that is at 7,000. Like Radke has about a 35% chance to win this fight. You don't lose points for like post-fight interviews. So like I will be probably playing some Radke just because I think there's some salary relief there. I think somebody in this like 7,200, 7,300 and below range is probably going to win. Like that's what the odds tell us. And Radke I think has the best win odds of anybody 74 or 7,300 and below. So he's got a little bit of a better line than Cody Steeman. So at a $300 cheaper price. So yeah, I mean, I'll be playing some Radke, and the idea that he's just getting maybe a striking only win, and
it's kind of a win equity play. Let's be honest. I mean, even I think he would score decently because of volume striking.
Yeah,
it's just there's not a super high ceiling, I would say.
Yeah. I mean, he doesn't have like great odds for like a early finish or anything. It doesn't have like the best odds even among the underdogs, right, for a first round win. But he has good odds for a win. So and at 7,000, what does he need to do to land on the win?
Yeah. There's 3 fights that we haven't talked about yet. We can quickly go over after this ad read. Roto Grinders Premium. There's never been a better time to sign up for Roto Grinders Premium with NBA, PGA, NHL, MMA, MLB. and WNBA. We've got an option for whatever level you're looking for. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250 instead of buying every single 6 individual months of combo premium. You can also get your first month of RotoGrinders Premium for $40 off for a limited time. Those that want to test run before dipping their toes into the water, get a 3-day pass, $19.99. Check the link in the description below. And I talk about a mixed bag, kind of like all those different sports I just named off. Here's a mixed bag of fights that we haven't hit on yet that are actually still somewhat important. And we have the Brad Katona and Butler fight. Holy hell, is Brad Katona a sore thumb on this slate? Look forward to hearing what you had to say on it, but it's hard to click his button. I could see a world where it's a flip a coin where he comes out like, looks like $1 million against a bum in Butler, and then Butler is freaking huge. The guy is massive when they were at weigh-ins. That'll be interesting. Let me talk to you about a quick fight that I think could end quickly. Julian Marquez, Zach Reese, freaking love this fight. This fight will have action. They'll go to try to kill each other in the first round. You can get bailed out by a second round finish in this spot, Squirrel. I think that's a really another interesting fight. And then let me just make the Cliff Notes version. I freaking love Ludovic Klein versus Thiago Moises. I love that from a fight fan standpoint. But for fantasy, I look at it and say, what do we see, right? When these guys start stepping up the stone, you see like they just start negating each other for fantasy. And I really worry about the fantasy ceiling output in that spot. If there were to be one fighter out of those two to be able to take it over, I think it would be Ludovic Klein. Yeah, I gave you a lot to work with there. Three completely different fights, but I'd definitely need to hit on them before we get out of here.
Sure. So yeah, the taking the Brad Katona one first because he's the biggest favorite on the card. He's not seeing that much ownership, and I'm there with the field. Is not really wanting to roster him that much. I mean, 9,600 is a huge price tag for a guy that's probably not going to get an early win. If he doesn't get the early win, probably not going to put up a big score. He's just not that high volume. We've seen this with some other fighters. Honestly, it's usually like female fighters where it's like a massive lopsided line, but like the chances for a finish just aren't that strong, and the volume's not that strong. So yeah, I'm probably going to be pretty under the field on Brad Katona, even at if 20%. I don't know. I mean, I'll still roster him. I think about 15% is about right. So I may not be as under the field on him as I thought because he just doesn't seem to be that popular. And people realize that at 9,600, you have to make some like serious sacrifices in your lineup. With the rest of your lineup to get Katona in there. I've listened to way more people this week and read more people this week that think Jesse Butler's got a really good shot at winning this fight than I have that are in favor of Ricky Tercios, which is I find interesting.
We don't know what we're going to get. He could be one of the worst UFC fighters of all time and get killed again. Or he could just have a really, really even decision equity. I mean, he's huge. He could just stay from distance and, strike. I don't know. It's hard to get to Katona for sure.
And I might not play a ton of Jesse Butler. I'll have some of them. I might, though, like I've heard so many people that are like think Jesse Butler has a really good shot to win this fight that that might be one of the few money line bets I make on UFC just to see how this plays out. So I kind of agree that there's no reason he came into his UFC debut on short notice and just got
Let me talk you into it real quick. Plus 3.5. If you have those round props, that's very fun because the state of MMA right now, that's how you can exploit the cards, because if you get one round from all these different judges, they'd never have the same cards. That's an exploit that we have for us.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's a good point. Maybe do the plus 3.5 rather than the just the straight money line, because money line is a big long shot, but
big ask.
Plus 3.5, I'm seeing plus 180 on DraftKings. So yeah, that's a possibility as well.
What do you think about that Marquez and Reese? Is that a key to the slate? Because when it's a first round finish, it absolutely is going to be important.
Yeah, and actually, I think the Zach Reese side is really interesting as well because he's the underdog price to 7,900, and yeah, this fight I'm seeing Reese with about a 27% chance, like implied odds of getting the first round win. Marquez about 30%. Those are two of the highest numbers on the card, and I like that in particular when both fighters are maybe going out there with a mindset and a good chance of getting the first round win. So when it's one fighter has a good chance for a first round win, but then his cardio falls off, well, then the other fighter's strategy, right, is, well, I'm going to extend this fight. But when it's both fighters, no, both fighters have the mindset. We're just doing this for one round, right? Like, then great, because then there's a really good chance it ends in the first round. And so that makes, especially priced in the mid range, that makes it a really good fight to target. 7,900 and 8,300, like, because then let's say it does get extended into the second round, you're still kind of okay, because you don't need some kind of like outsized winning score to land on the winning lineup.
It's always funny to me, right, when we're talking about playing Zachary's Julian Marquez over Ludovic Klein and Thiago Moises. These are two guys that are moving up. Well, first of all, we have Ludovic Klein moving up the food chain. Thiago Moises has faced everybody and actually given good fights against top elite competition. But I can't see myself playing either of these two guys because I think it's going to be competitive. I like that you tagged Moises, right? What have we seen from him lately? He's aggressive. We've never seen this mold of Thiago Moises through his career. I bet you even know this, tagging him. It's like Moises had the ability to have 100 plus anytime he was out there, but what was he content with doing, John? Oh, I'll take my 70 DraftKings points and I'll move home.
But yeah, 3 of his last 4 fights, actually, his last 3 wins have all been 92 points or above, and 2 of them were 100 points or above. So yeah, I think we're seeing a little bit more volume, and I think this is a fight that could get there because it's priced in the mid range, and could also, like, Moises could get a takedown, and then maybe we're getting some reversals, right? So I think this one could be sneaky high scoring. It's definitely not one I'm looking to avoid. And like, these guys are also capable of getting a finish too. So it's not one like where it's like, oh, it's they just don't have the possibility to get the other fighter out of there. Like, this could land in a finish. Like, these are two like fairly big guys that can, they can knock somebody out. So, yeah, I've sounds like I maybe have a little bit more interest in that fight than you did.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's, but that's why, right? You have the MME, you're able to take the stabs. The lesser lineups that you have, it's kind of difficult to get there from a decision-making standpoint. But I see in chat that J3 said a little bit of money coming in on Radke down to plus 170. Interesting. I mean, there's going to be a little bit of time before lock here, so that'll be interesting. What do you do before lock? Like, now that we have a little bit of time, like, what is your decision making? Do you look at those lines moving if there's severe movement, and then kind of take us out of here? I'll get us out of here, but like, there's a little bit of time, and I feel that love, right? I feel the lineup building process. I love it.
Yeah, sure. So like last few minutes before lock, like, I'm looking for, is anything scratched or is there any overlay anywhere? Right. Like, last few minutes, last hour leading up to lock, what I'm looking for is any dramatic line movement. So like, we are seeing some line movement in favor of Radke, but it's not like necessarily accelerating. When we see like accelerating, like a 10% change in implied win odds, I think that's something we've talked about, where like, those fighters are undefeated in the first minute of the first round. I think is when there's dramatic line movement in favor of somebody, especially inside the distance. And that could be maybe, whispers of an injury or something like that. Who knows? But it's something I want to know about before my lineups lock. And then, in a couple hours leading up to to that, then I'm just working on my lineup, seeing what contests I want to map out.
Yeah, it's awesome. I love this card. I think we nailed it. Next week, Taisoro Taira makes his way towards the title. I am so thrilled he's getting up there towards the main event. Dude, it's like 1 million flyweight fights next week. That's going to be really fun for lineup buildings. I was surprised when I'm looking at it. It's all, like Nate Maness versus Jimmy Flick and Asu Amabaya versus Jose Johnson. It seems like there's just a lot of lower weight classes, which should be a lot of points, I'd imagine.
Wait, how did Nate Maness not end up on the Kentucky card? Isn't he?
I listen. Do you think the UFC has any clue what they're doing?
I mean, Maness is from Kentucky. Yeah,
I know. They have no clue.
Yeah, the card's in Louisville.
Hey, we don't even know if McGregor is actually going to be fighting. It looks like he will be, but it's like, that's the state of MMA, right?
Yeah, we'll see. Always a possibility of some changes to the card as we lead up in the weeks leading into the card. I am surprised because I was wondering like, what happened to Nate Maness? Why is he not in Louisville? I didn't realize he was fighting next week. But yeah, no, should be a fun card. It's going to be a long one, 14 fights, but get a little bit of an earlier start, so it shouldn't go too late into the night like the pay-per-views do. Yeah, should be a good card. I would say the one thing to keep in mind, like this is wide open. Like this is not like a scratch every dollar you need, because there's just no live underdogs, and some of these $9,600, $9,500 guys are going to put up massive scores. Like, go do it, play who you want. Like this is a wide open card. Leave money on the table if you want. It's a good card for that. And yeah, it should be a good night for the fights.
Yeah, leave a couple dollars for the showdown slate when somehow Tomar, I don't know, lands a kill shot or something crazy, right? Like this is a wide open slate for sure. And I'm very sarcastic with that statement. Thank you to TJ for, well, you never know. It's MMA, right? Who knows? Thank you, TJ, for producing the show. For John, myself, we will see you guys next week for that Satsura Taira 13 fight card.